Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Andrei Shevchenko, and on behalf of Ukraine Media Center Ukrinform team, I want to thank the journalists who tell about our fight for freedom. Today we're having a special event. We will be talking about how Ukrainians use the electronic services, why it's important for the Media Center of Ukraine, Ukrinform. During the last year, during the war, we've seen that the picture changed dramatically with use of the electronic services by the citizens of Ukraine. Today we will be able to see the results of this study in this area, and we will probably proceed immediately to this study. Mstislav Banik, Head of Electronic Services Development at the Ministry of Digital Transformation of Ukraine. Good afternoon, everybody. It's maybe a very important topic today. I will share my key summary that I achieved during this last year of war. The process of digitalization is going on. It was not launched during the war, and the bet that we made on the development of the mobile application, it brought its fruits now. And last week, during the World Economic Forum, it was announced that we export DIA abroad, and Estonia, which was #1 country in terms of electronic governance, it was Estonia who were the first to take the resolve to adopt our experience, not under the influence of some cut code of which DIA was developed upon, but now they're trying to adapt this DIA application for the Estonian electronic governance, and that's yet another confirmation that this area of electronic services is very important for all over the world. We will be talking about the people who use internet. Those indicators change on an annual basis, and during the war we were keeping on launching the electronic services that we were planning to launch before the full-scale invasion. The social services, pension certificates, something that we launched together. And we are now facing some new challenges to launch the services related to the aftermath of the war. For example, the information about the damaged property, the damaged real estate or destroyed real estate, or services related to informing about the movement of Russian troops, the launch of the chatbot, and the services which are not government services, as they are like DIA radio or DIA television, so people have access to the United News Marathon, the radio broadcast, so that those news can be delivered to the people when Russians try to destroy our TV channels, to deprive people of the possibility to receive faithful Ukrainian news. And even in the absence of electric power and the breakouts with the cell communication, the number of the users was growing. So today we will be talking about the results, but one of the key insights that I want to share, that within 2022 the digital services became #1 in a sense that they became the one way of delivering the documents and news to the people, because we were living in a paradigm just recently that offline is #1 thing, but online is something auxiliary. But now we see that offline cannot exist physically now, because I know a lot of places that were the centers for municipal services, and they were targeted by missile strikes, and talking about the areas of active warfare where we cannot even talk about any offline services. So DIA was the only bridge to those services delivered by the government. So I want to thank UNDP, I want to thank the government of Switzerland who supported us in producing those services during the war for those who were affected by the war. And this study that we did, it may show the dynamics, where we're moving, what's the direction we're moving. Yes, indeed, the war made Ukraine a leader in terms of digital services in the world. We will see this study, and I want to pass the mic to Olena Ursu, who represents the UNDP project group here in Ukraine. Thank you, good afternoon. The UNDP supports such studies, such interviewing of people within the last 3 years, and it's very important for us to track the evolutions of people's opinions, the challenges they're facing, so that within our projects and initiatives we could relevantly react to these difficulties and challenges. And we will definitely hear the final figures from Mr. Anton, who represents the Kiev International Institute of Sociology, who is a partner in such interviewing. But I would like to emphasize some areas, some trends that we witnessed, something that we will be working within the next couple of years in support of digital transformation. First, we see that there is a steadily growing number of citizens of Ukraine who use the electronic services. As of today, according to the results of this most recent study, like 3 out of 5 Ukrainians who said that they have an experience of using the digital services in DIA, and they evaluated as possible or mostly positive or mostly positive, which means they're satisfied with the quality of the services, and it means that the number of services accessible through DIA is steadily growing. Also for UNDP, which implements their activities through the prism of this steady development in order not to have anybody stay aside, it's important to cover the most vulnerable parts of the population. I mean the people who end up in some difficult conditions in their lives. So we've seen that according to the results of this study, there is a growing number of internally displaced persons in Ukraine, unfortunately, and a lot of them were using electronic services in DIA, registering their status. And also there is a growing number of disabled people and people over 65 years, the pensioners, the single parents, and other vulnerable categories of Ukrainian citizens. It's very important for us because as the government of Ukraine emphasizes, the digital services should be accessible to anybody, and we will pay more attention in our program activity to this matter. But the key user of the DIA is mostly a young person living in big cities. So our partners, the government of Sweden and the ministry, we will take all reasonable efforts to expand the user base in the smaller areas, in villages and smaller towns. We were working last year on launch of 10 new digital services, but also we wanted to raise awareness among Ukraine's population about such services, and more than 70% of the citizens said they were seeing the information about the launch of such new services, which shows that the level of awareness of the opportunities, is growing among the users of DIA. And I also want to emphasize that 1/3 of both men and women is still remaining who never used digital services, and the majority of them, like 70%, say that they never needed them. Actually, that was the reason they never used them. And the more people will install DIA, the more this percentage will decrease. But there is also a large fraction of population who mentioned they don't have proper digital skills. And us, as the UN Development Program, we have a priority for information campaigns and training courses and other instruments that we will use to increase the level of awareness of the population about the available services and to expand the digital literacy in Ukraine. And before teaser becomes a spoiler, Anton Grushetskyi, Kiev International Institute of Sociology. Good afternoon. Thank you. It's my honor to be able to work in this project for 3 years already. We draw the attention of the media and of the population that there are many sociological indicators that should be told about. And now the center also is a part of repelling the enemy attack. And the sociological indicators show that there is a growing optimism in Ukraine. A lot of people think that Ukraine will be a prospering country in 10 years, a member of European Union. And we have to understand that in parallel there should be work in the society which become the stamp for creating the new prospering Ukraine, a country where you want to live, where you receive high quality services. And when we see any positive dynamics, it's very pleasant and it's a stimulus for working on and on. It's not that we're just talking about, but there are some practical changes that Ukrainian citizens feel, and it's a great factor for development of Ukraine after the victory. So first of all, let's proceed to the key information. There was a lot of information gathered. We will tell you about the basic indicators. So first of all is the level of use of internet. Talking about the digital services, it contemplates some minimal competences in terms of using digital services. We see that in 2021 and 2022, 71%, almost 72% became the daily users of internet. So the fraction of those who don't use internet at all is minimal today. And in this slide we will see the information which is broke down by age. We have this age differentiation that the people of older age use internet less, but we pay attention to the fact that the typical portrait of an internet user was a young person. Now even people up to 60 years use internet on a daily basis, and even over 60 years. And the number of people over 70, like 60%, they don't use internet on daily basis, but the households usually include young people also, so these statistics may be variable. And there is access to internet in villages and small towns, and it promotes the use of such services everywhere. But we have to understand that there is older population which should be reached out to increase this number of people using internet on a daily basis. And there is another indicator, the Ukrainians who were using the digital services at least once, and we see this indicator steadily growing since 2020. Now it is 63%. It's a very powerful indicator. The people who tried a service once or even more, and it's a great level of engagement, in fact. And we understand if there is such a huge number of people using the digital services, and if those services were bad, we would feel a very powerful wave of hatred. But we see that we're proceeding to a new norm, to a new standard, that all the services may be accessible through and available through DIA. There is also age differentiation, sometimes up to 100% for youngers. And the majority of the people who don't use such services are obviously among the older population, but some of them really don't have such a need, but some don't have proper skills to use such services. among the older population. But the advantage, I mean, in terms of sociology of people, of the younger people using these digital services increasingly, is that they're economically active population. So the question was which exactly were the digital services that people were using, and the leader is the DIA application. Meanwhile, it's a list of certain services for the people. It's an integral application for government services, or integrated application. So back in 2022, this indicator was 30%, and which is even lower in 2020. And COVID pandemic and the digital certificates were something that promoted actually the application of DIA. So you could see that apart from certificates, you could use other services, which turned out to be very convenient for the people to use. And some people were just used to some non-digital services which were also available through DIA, and that was probably the only reason they were not using it in DIA. Obviously, we were asking how convenient is that for the people. Obviously, if you use some services and you have no other options, so we were asking how convenient was that for you. So 80% of the users said that it was convenient. However, about 50% were saying that they wanted some improvements, but that was constructive critics, which was useful for everybody. We could fix some bugs to detailize some functions. It's a healthy process, and that's the feedback that the ministry reacts to along with the partners. And year to year, this indicator that is not lowering, because people keep observing the quality of application. The bugs are being fixed. So if before it was only 19% of the people who were not seeing any bugs in the system, later this indicator grew up to 20%. Well, it may be a small change, but it shows that even during the war, the work is still going on, and people feel how useful the application is. And we also were asking what's the format that people prefer, either visiting the municipal service centers or rather DIA application, because the people have really positive experience receiving services from municipal administrative service centers. So talking to those people, we understood that people were trying to do it online, and they start getting used to it because they understand that it's convenient. Well, as we mentioned, among the people who never use digital services, 70% state that they never had such a need. But we have to understand that some people just don't realize that there are some needs that they have, and such needs may be satisfied online without going anywhere. And they just don't realize that using this service online would be more convenient and more quick. And some people just don't really want to do it because it's the issue of some psychological barrier that we have to keep working with. But people keep hearing it from their friends, from their relatives, so they will understand that it's more comfortable, and maybe they will proceed to using those services in digital mode, so they understand that it's not so complicated, because sometimes the elderly, they have, for example, an impression that the digital services is something remote, but it's really built in a very user-friendly way. And another important indicator is when we talk about the development, what should we pay attention to? There is a number of criteria for those digital services that we cannot say that 70 or 80% is a number one criteria. It shows the difference of Ukrainian audience that we should respect their comments, but we can segregate two main clusters: is the availability of feedback or availability of contact with the support center, something when you can talk to a real person through online chat or make a call. Another component is confidentiality and security of information. So confidentiality, or the availability of digital signature, so it's the security thing. When we hear the news that there were 20 million digital accounts sold somewhere, so people treat these digital services with caution. So it's more in the sphere of psychology rather than objective things. But yes, we have to support people in this regard. We have to convince them that there is maximum security, and we are ready to help you. We are ready to support you in this regard. Another very important slide that you can see later in detail. The respondents see certain areas for themselves where the digital services would be useful for them. For example, the registration of new vehicles, registration of a newborn child. So people are interested to have those services available in digital format. And it's important that actually almost 80% were able to say that they found at least one service, at least one digital service useful. They've seen if before it was 70% who were saying they never had a necessity to use digital services, now they've seen the list of those services available, and they've seen that they can do a lot of things online. And this awareness, now people understand that there is a big number of such services used, very interesting offers. So people start using it, and they continue working in this direction. And it's cool that there is a sociologic support, and it's not only the project being implemented, but there is a constant work going on. Thank you for your attention. If there are any questions on the floor, please let us know. Good afternoon, Yana Koloda, Ukrinform, and my question is to Mr. Mstislav. It's known that Ukraine was allocated $650 million for development of DIA, and what are the countries that, except for Estonia, that Ukraine cooperates in this area with? USAID allocated $650 million for promotion, for analysis of technical components. What is the launch of DIA abroad? The launch of DIA abroad is not Microsoft Office that you install on any computer. It's not the system that on one end, for example, for different users, there may be a different list of fields in their application. The launch of DIA abroad means the access to government registers, so it's not about the deployment of DIA in certain countries, but rather it's related to analysis to see whether it may be launched in this or that country. Generally, for their understanding, in USAID is from the very first day with us. And why the USAID or UNDP support the development of DIA in Ukraine? Because it's transparency, it's fighting corruption, it's the availability for different categories of population, and the money that was invested by our donors, the governments of the United States and Sweden. It was not only that those investments justified themselves, but it created the instrument that can help other countries, and there is interest to spread this experience to other countries. So those funds allocated by USAID are for preparation of export of such solution to democratic countries. And what are other countries that we cooperate with, or it's only Estonia? Well, it's a little bit too early to talk about the list of the countries, because at the government level it's a lengthy process, because from the beginning there is interest, there are negotiations, there are technical consultations, and only thereafter it may take a shape of some international agreements, and we can only announce something after those agreements are entered into. Because, for example, in case of Estonia, we have this agreement for a long time because we use a lot of Estonia's experience in our digital transformation. We had a lot of negotiations last year, we had a lot of sessions in autumn, and only now they announced that they will launch their application in the middle of this year. So there is a number of the countries, and probably this year we will be able to announce not 2 or 3 countries. Thank you. And another question is, what are the services that ministry is working on, and what are the new services that we may see this year? Well, we launched the beta testing of aid to the single parents. There is the beta testing is about to end for registration of matrimony. Also, there is the launch of the project for replacement of lamps, which is or light bulbs, which is quite important for energy technical area. You know, the replacement of these light bulbs, it may decrease the consumption of electric power 10% in Ukraine. So it's a big national project for light bulbs development. It's in beta testing phase now. So the people who signed up, they already know the departments of Ukrpochta, the post offices where they can pick up their new light bulbs. And it's obvious that we keep working on custom clearance. It's a long-term process because the car customs clearance doesn't mean that we replaced paper form to digital, but is the transformation of the whole sphere, of the whole field. And there is a project, it's one of the important projects that we work on, and with the support of UNDP and Sweden, we will keep developing the social sphere, because it's very important now, important this year, because there is a growing number of people who need support due to the war, who need some aid. I mean, starting with the internally displaced people and other affected categories of Ukrainian citizens, the veterans, the injured. So that there is an increasingly growing number of such people, because the people who sacrifice their health, their lives for the victory, they will need such services more and more. It's our basic plan. One second, microphone. Yeah, 650,000, not 650 million.
Steve Kleiman, Pacific Rex. I'm wondering if you can talk about the use of DIA for reporting unexploded ordnance, and if you happen to have any statistics as to how many cases of UXO were reported.
It's about the damaged property, etc., right?
My understanding is that if someone comes across a UXO object, a mine, some kind of booby trap, that you can take a photo and report it.
Chatbot with reports of this, yes. So if to speak about the chatbot, when people can report about such things, there's something about 450,000 of reports we have.
450,000?
Yeah.
And does it include the improvised explosive devices that were part of the
It
question?
includes as devices as Russian troops. So this is the general chatbot that collects different reports and different kinds.
I'm confused. Is the chatbot a component of DIA? Does that fall under your management structure?
Some way this is like separate solution. It's outside third-party chatbot based on the Telegram messenger, but at the same time, before reporting, you have to confirm your personality through the application, as DIA can verify you without sharing your personal data. That means that we understand that this is the real Ukrainian citizen reported there, so there's no fake information from the Russian bots or etc. So we have the link on this chatbot in our application, And by tapping on this link, you will your mobile phone will open the Telegram. But before reporting, you have to confirm your personality again through our application DIA.
Got it. Is that a Ministry of Digital Transformation project all the way through?
Yeah, this is the project of Ministry of Digital Transformation of Ukraine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ще запитання?
Any more questions? I will have a question to whoever may answer it. You track how the use of digital services is changing with time, but can we focus on this last year after 24th of February? What are the changes that we're seeing in terms of using digital services in psychology? What do we observe? Well, let me start. Within the last year, we've seen the growing number of users. It was 15.5 million or 16 million unique users, and very quickly this number grew up to 18 million, and now it's 18.6 million unique users. So more than half of adult population of Ukraine is to the use. Thanks to the services that we were able to use, like radio and television, it became, such a trusted source of information for the people. People started spending more time in DIA. And what I'm trying to say is, like an example, having a news channel, for example, we added some entertainment content to improve people's moods, to distract them in case of air raid alerts. So we were broadcasting through the DIA TV, we were broadcasting Eurovision final, and more than 1 million people saw it. Well, it was final, not the selection, and we had announcements through DIA about the national selection, and I think about 170,000 people voted during this national selection. So it increased the scale of the people who were ready to, so to say, to work through this digital application. And I will add something more about the elderly audience. It's really the elderly start using DIA more and more. It's not personalized information, but there is a drawdown by age. We have 4.5 million users over 60 years old. Do you see any services that within use of which there were changes during last year? Well, as soon as we launch any new service, the number of users grows, the demand is still growing, and what I would like also to mention is that 160,000 or 180,000 new private entrepreneurs were registered during the war. It's the continuation, it means the continuation of business activities and growing number of new businesses in Ukraine. Well, and that there is such a thing when quantity transforms to quality. Well, war is a tragic event, and we are asked to comment how the society is changing, how it's being transformed. We cannot say that that the war united people, because Ukrainians were united even before the war. The positive trend started after 2014, but the war expedites a number of positive changes. People get adapted, people try something new, and there is the intensification of use of digital services. And this is what I mean by transformation of quantity to quality. Yeah, we mentioned the growing number of users, but the use of DIA became more intense, and it's organic part of it. So it's transitioned from something new to becoming the standard of our life. And now people, or soon people, will be asking why that this or that service is not available through DIA. And it's, I would say, in compliance with the standards of the new world, because showing Ukrainians in this ethnic, cultural, historic portrait. Now it's different. It shows that we are the modern nation. We're moving forward, and we are ahead of Russia with this historic view of the world. And these some minor things in life, like use of digital services, it gives us more confidence that we are advanced nation. Well, it would be even better maybe that Mr. Anton finished, because it was a positive note, because I want to bring us back to this sad reality. Unfortunately, war influences a lot on the people of Ukraine, and us with our partners in the government and other UN agencies, we studied the influence of war on people. On this general aspect, this study will be presented in a couple of months. But what you ask, how it influenced the use of digital services, I think that there is a growing number of people who need some social support, social aid through their due to their vulnerabilities. We were saying that presented the results of this study that there is a growing the number of internally displaced persons and other vulnerable categories of population, like disabled or elderly, or people who, or families who lost their members due to the war. And there is a big number of people who need some aid due to these changes caused by war. And there was a demand for new services in DIA when people need some support from the government, either veterans or members of their families, or the people who became disabled as a result of the war, not only veterans but also civilians who were affected by the war. The destruction of their property. So I wanted just to mention these vulnerable categories of population. Mstislav Banik, Ministry of Digital Transformation; Olena Ursu, UNDP; Anton Grushetskyi, Kiev International Institute of Sociology. Our next event will be at 1500. We will talk about psychological warfare and how to live in conditions of this psychological warfare. Thank you for your attention. Stand with Ukraine.
Дуже пізнавально і оптимістично.